So good morning. Again, my topic for today is aligning volunteer goals with programmatic outcomes. And I'm looking forward to having this discussion with you. And it's going to be a great morning. So I hope everyone brought their cup of coffee. Okay, so our agenda for today is an introduction of myself and how I kind of came about this topic, talking about volunteer motivations, harnessing volunteer power, and then where do you go from here? My assumptions for the session are that I'm just here sharing my experiences, best practices, and things that I learned along the way. But doesn't mean that it's going to work for you or that you'll be able to implement exactly what I have done in your organization. But I'm hopeful that you'll at least be able to take something from today's presentation and working with the larger group and implement that in your organization, maybe even starting today. I know we all bring experience and knowledge about volunteer management and engagement. And I hope that as we go through today, you feel empowered to share those experiences and thoughts because someone else in the room may have a different experience or have different knowledge and be willing to share that with you. Again, we're all here to talk about volunteers and collaborate on how we can empower them and empower ourselves. So at this point, I want to launch poll 1, which is going to ask you 2 questions in a row. The first one about your organization setting goals for volunteers, and the second about volunteer mindset. So if everyone can take a second to answer those. So it looks like majority of us do set measurable goals and outcomes for our volunteers, which is great. Those of us who don't or are unsure, hopefully you'll find some things you can implement today along the way. And those who do can share your experiences or kind of learn how to enhance what you're already doing. And then I love that 92% of us are on the side of being able to change our volunteers' mindset. So we'll talk about that today as well. So how did I begin my volunteer management journey? I work for what is called the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And if you're not familiar with that, Osher Lifelong Learning Institutes, or OLLIs, are membership-based programs that are affiliated with colleges and universities across the country. And they provide non-credit programming for retired and semi-retired adults, specifically targeting those aged 50 and over. Each program is provided grants and endowments from the Osher Foundation, and we work alongside of them and the college or university to meet specific goals for those grants and endowments that they provide to us, and provide greater lifelong learning opportunities to our community and the state. Classes and events are for the pure enjoyment of learning. So there's no grades, usually no homework. Maybe you might have to read a poem or write a poem or take some pictures in between classes, and there is no tests. So a staple of these institutes is the shared governance model that we have between the organizations, volunteers, and administration. Thank you, Karen. Yes, Ollie does rock. I love it. It's been a great experience for me. So in 2016, I joined as the program coordinator for Ollie at UNLV, which is in Las Vegas. And at the time, we had over 200 volunteers in more than 12 types of roles, including an advisory board, 13 committees, over 100 volunteer instructors, and more than 90 classes a semester, with volunteers in the classroom helping take attendance, give announcements, those types of things. We also had a coffee room, which you can see part of in this photo of our advisory board. I was trying to get them to smile for a photo. And in that coffee room, we served anywhere from 800 to 1,000 cups of coffee and snacks in a day. And while we target 50 plus, the average age of our member tends to be in their early 70s, and the average age of our volunteer actually tends to be in their late 70s. So by the time they become involved, familiar with the program, and really want to start engaging and assisting, they've been in the program for a few years. And when it came onto the role, the volunteers had little guidance and support from administration and the college. It was really up to them to work independently on developing their own curriculum, events, trying to book classrooms, social activities, and even their internal and external communications, including email blasts or phone calls or fundraising. And it was really often frustrating and difficult for them because of these limited resources and the access to the university and the software that they needed to be successful. Since that time, I am now the director for OLLI at Granite State College, where we now have over 20 committees that are spread through 4 regions in the state. And each of these regions have their own ideas and ambitions about how they want to see their programming, what their goals are for the program, and what they think is the most important thing that we do with OLLI at GSD. So when I began my career working with volunteers, my mindset was just like this model here, that I was focused on the volunteers' desires and experience, ensuring that their time assisting our cause was what they wanted it to be, excuse me, and because I wanted them to return. I wanted to have consistent volunteers, and I wanted to make sure they kept coming back. So my goal was to make sure that they enjoyed themselves while they were volunteering with us. However, it does not always align with the goals of the organization or the cause at hand to simply focus on the volunteer. And it also does not provide the volunteer with a full understanding and appreciation about how what they're doing impacts the larger mission and values of the organization. So again, we're all here, we love our volunteers, and when we get them, we think, oh, we struck gold, right? But sometimes it's a little push and pull to get the volunteers in the right spot. So finding volunteers who align themselves with our mission is often very easy. We can go out and share our cause, and we'll have people sign up and say that they want to volunteer, and they have their own idea of what that means. And it doesn't always mean that having an extra set of hands is going to be helpful to reach our goal if it's not efficient and effective along the way. So I personally learned this when volunteers started coming into the OLLI office, and they were volunteering or doing things that they thought were helpful, but were actually counterproductive and caused us more work along the way. Emily, can we launch poll 2? So what is the most common reason that you believe people volunteer? So majority of us believe that it's all of the above: personal growth and development, health benefits, and personal satisfaction of helping others. And then almost half of us believe it's just personal satisfaction of helping others. So those who answered all of the above are correct. So the main motivations for volunteers are health. Socializing and altruistic opportunities really help people feel that they're having a positive impact on their community and allows them to feel better, which we all know when we do volunteer things. Personal growth and development. So the opportunity to learn new skills, to continue passion for lifelong learning, and to expand their network. And then personal satisfaction, leaving a legacy of knowledge and service, and then gaining the benefits of volunteerism in the community, and also keeping that active lifestyle. Something interesting are the lasting health benefits, which is interesting. No one selected that in the poll about what the health benefits are. So there are many, many health benefits. So Dr. Allen, or Dr. Chip Teal, studied under Mr. Osher's brother, actually, and Mr. Osher is the person who endows all of our programs. And he studied under him as a medical student and found his love of gerontology and ensuring that people can successfully age in their home, in place, and remain active in their local community. And he does this through his company called Full Circle America. In his studies, he also learned that adults who volunteer a minimum of 2 hours a week consistently have health benefits that last for decades. And this includes lowering mortality rates, reducing depression, especially in adults who may be socially isolated, and reductions in cognitive and functional declines. And this will last for decades to come. And the earlier volunteers start doing this, the more benefits they'll receive in the long run. So keeping all that in mind, of course, I want my volunteers to be successful. I want them to be healthy, and I want them to meet all of the things that they're looking for. We started looking at a second model. So I wanted to look at the benefits and the positive impact that they could have on our admin team. We were a small team, and we did need the volunteers' help. But I wanted to help guide them in the right direction. So I worked with my director at the time to develop and improve a volunteer success model, which is what you see here. And I knew if I expressed the needs of the membership to our volunteers, that they would just completely understand. And at the end of the difficult journey to get them on board with our needs would be done. I knew that this would enhance the experience if they could just connect the dots exactly the way that we did, and just sharing with them that their volunteers needed to meet the needs of the membership would do that. So I did this, and I shared with them that we want to have a balancing act between the wants of our members and the wants of the volunteers. So people are and then their thoughts were that people were volunteering for the program. So shouldn't we just appreciate that? It shouldn't matter the balancing act. It should only matter what the volunteer wants. And doesn't matter what the members need because they were volunteering. And so everyone should appreciate that. And of course, while I thought that that would solve the problem, I still had a few lessons to learn. So finding that missing link. So what else was I missing along the way? So the first outline that we put together was starting with the volunteers' desires, which you see here, and then ending with the benefits to our membership. But there was something missing along the way to help these volunteers see beyond the task that was in front of them and onto the bigger picture. I came in and I stuffed envelopes. I came in and I cleaned a counter, or I answered a phone. It wasn't that helpful to you. And I wanted to impress upon them the long-term sustainability of the program and what they were doing and how it impacted that. So at this point, you're probably questioning why we didn't just give them descriptions of their roles, which I asked you all at the beginning. We had those, but the initial descriptions just described their piece of the puzzle, their one task at hand. It didn't talk about deliverables, and it didn't talk about a connection to the program, to the event, to the overall goals, or to the direction that we were moving. There were no explanations and no way for them to measure their success. In their head, when they came in and did those small individual tasks of what they thought was helping, they were being successful. So that's when we determined that we needed to develop tangible deliverables and then connect those deliverables to the measurable outcomes for our volunteers. And this came to our team because at the time the university was asking us to look at measurable outcomes of the top tier initiative and how our work impacted them. So we decided to take that same outline and implement it in our program. So the first thing that our team had to do was we decided that we needed to be cohesive as an administrative team who had its own core purpose, its own values, and we knew that changing the volunteer mindset and process was going to be a very cumbersome task. We were a new team, so this was really important to us to make sure we were on the same page, have the same language, and being able to work independently, knowing our common goals for success. We wanted to make sure that we weren't inhibiting the process by having to keep stopping and coming back to our director, or those who reported to me having to come back to me and ask questions all of the time. So building in that autonomy for our team, everywhere from student assistants, who it was their first job, to our director, to make sure that we all knew if we made a decision, it was the right decision to make. And this led us to Patrick Lencioni's healthy organization model. So Patrick Lencioni is the founder of the Table Group and the founder of the healthy organization model, that he is implementing for Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies across the country. So initially, you begin this process by working through the 5 dysfunctions of a team that ensures that we all trust one another, we have clear internal communication, and we have consistent external communication about our goals, plans, and initiatives. From there, we work together to define our business model, our core purpose, our core values, and our strategic anchors by answering the 6 questions that you see on the screen. And again, those questions can also be found in his book. He walks you through the process of doing that. And while this was a really labor-intensive process for our team, we wanted to go beyond our individual job descriptions and know that we as a unit, we're going to help our volunteers succeed in leaving a legacy of their work in the program and growing our membership to over 2,000, as well as becoming a more active part of our greater Las Vegas community to share the program with those who were underserved or may have not yet heard of us. So initially I mentioned that we had 13 committees, and then we were able to reduce this to 8 by weeding out some committees that were no longer active or combining them with other small groups. And as you can see here, my role was the program coordinator. I worked with the majority of the committees. I had additional people reporting to me on staff, and the director worked with a few other committees to make sure that they were active and doing what they needed to do, such as fundraising and leading all of the goals and initiatives for our program. We had to break this down even further by getting all of our leadership team together and saying, what are the 4 or 5 cornerstones of what we do? What is the most important things that we will be doing over the next few years? And those came to be our 4 committees, which included our educational programming or building our curriculum, our member engagement, our fundraising, which is a key aspect of maintaining our endowments, and of course, volunteerism and community outreach. To best do this, we actually split our management team and developed 2 program manager positions, one that was inside the classroom and one that was community facing, to allow for leading the volunteers in the right direction and making sure that everyone had the best possible experience. So as we all know, everyone interprets each situation differently based on their experience, their knowledge, and what they hope to gain. I'm sure that each of you right now are interpreting things that I'm saying in your own way, and you're taking from it what you need. So you're hearing things differently. And with an increasingly active world, you know, we have emails, we have texts, and those connotations of what we're trying to get out to our community is not always met. So I developed 3 areas that I wanted to ensure ways that we communicated to our volunteers and hopefully to our incoming volunteers as well. And that was communicating the importance and relevance of their role to the volunteer and in its relation to the healthy organization model, which I shared earlier, creating that mutual understanding and advocacy for the program, its volunteers, and its members. And then providing trainings and meetings where necessary to empower these volunteers to define their new roles. So we all know that change is scary, change is hard, especially for volunteers when they see what they do being so important. And sometimes they see what they're doing as just a really small piece of our organization. So empowering them to feel that they can go and do things and make decisions was really helpful along the way. To be successful in these trainings and meetings, we outlined 4 key aspects of its communication. Describing the position in detail, so including why it mattered to the organization and when and how they would be able to see the impact of their role. So sometimes it's not always immediate, and we wanted to let them know what those results would look like. And it was imperative that we provided them with those ways to see that impact. So we as a team actually had to build out structures of how they would see that or ways that we would communicate that to them in the future. We provided a clear timeline and expectation, allowing the volunteers to be prepared by knowing what was expected of them, how the task should be completed. So for an example, if we had pre-event, if we had an event, I would have a pre-event meeting and provide all of this information to them. Communicate the importance of their fulfilling this role the same way every time and its continuity to those we serve. And eventually I would want them to train others coming into this position, again, leaving behind their legacy and their success. And finally, we work to treat it like a paid position, which some people might not agree with, but the reason behind this is that we want our volunteers to be accountable. And if there's no accountability and there's no expectation, then they don't see their connection to the overall picture. And we found it a disservice to those we were working with and those volunteering by holding them to a standard below their abilities and capabilities that we knew we had. So this was a really important aspect of the transition. And again, this is just an increased outline of those 4 questions or those 4 steps. And we put together the questions and bullet points to ensure that we were accomplishing the intended step along the way. So why do they matter? When and how will they see their impact, which I talked about, and then providing that impact. what is expected, when it's expected, and how should it be completed. Answering these questions allowed us to really build out that timeline for them and to build out that job description. And then ensuring continuity. Again, they are volunteers, so we try to provide flexibility, but rather than being flexible in the role and what we're asking them, we came up with new areas. So something interesting about incoming and younger volunteers is they would prefer to volunteer one time or while they're on campus or once a week. As I said earlier, our volunteer age is in their late 70s. So we wanted to engage newer volunteers, and we did this by coming up with one-time initiatives. So our older volunteers were our coordinators, and our younger volunteers, they came in and they made coffee and they put out snacks one day a week while they were on campus. And it allowed us to start getting them to interact, see the value in what they were doing, and ultimately lead into having some younger volunteers take on larger roles. And then again, treating it like a paid position, holding them accountable to see the benefit of the overall membership experience, and looking at the cost benefit and deliverables with that measurable impact that they had on the organization. So in changing the volunteer mindset, most of us thought that we could. But the initial mindset that we had at our organization was, I'm donating my time. It shouldn't matter what I do. You should just be thankful. And I'm sure, unfortunately, all of us have experienced that in some way or another along our time as volunteer managers. But what we were able to do was change to the current mindset of, I'm here and how can I help us accomplish something today? So the goal is to get them on board, to have that mindset, and to get them looking at volunteering as being part of the team and part of the overall success of the program. Again, we all want to appreciate our volunteers, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a meaningful way. So our organization built 2 volunteer appreciation events. We all know about National Volunteer Week, which is usually in April. We also built in one in the fall to say thank you to any of our volunteers who might be snowbirds. And surprisingly, in case you didn't know, Las Vegas is a big retirement destination. It is also a big destination, just like Florida, for snowbirds to go. And I just went through my first New Hampshire winter, so I fully understand why they want to go somewhere warmer now. And we looked at providing meaningful appreciation gifts and what that looked like for them. So we did things such as lunch boxes. A big thing of our program is we're similar to a school, and everyone comes and they bring their lunch and they share that lunch in our coffee room and in our classrooms. So this gave us a way to advertise how important our volunteers were to us, as well as show appreciation by providing them with something useful. We also had volunteer days. Most volunteers didn't want to just work with us. They wanted to work with other organizations. So we partnered with other organizations and created additional volunteer opportunities, provided coffee and snacks, and thanked all of our volunteers while we were there. And then the most successful by any means initiative that I have ever had is the handwritten thank you note. Everything that we do, even now in Ollie at GSD, I write a thank you note to every single volunteer, as well as to every single donor that goes through our organization to let them know that we appreciate them. Our new slogan became that Ollie runs on volunteer power, and this was to share the positive impact they're having in their role, but also used to assist with recruitment and retention of the volunteers by explaining the importance they had to our organization. So we're acknowledging that they're the cornerstone of programming, and we wanted our members to recognize their efforts by communicating to the entire community how they helped us. And we did that by sharing that they keep membership fees affordable, that they were adding their personal touch to the program. It is about them and what they want, and it gives them that opportunity to do so. That it increases their skills. Maybe they're using something that they did in their career. Maybe they learned something new and they want to participate. And again, as we've noted many times throughout the presentation, their health and those health benefits. And as you can see here, the happiness that they gain from their volunteerism. So that missing link and that final third piece that we put together was the measurable programmatic outcomes. So finally, at the end of the day, we came up with a three-prong approach to making sure that we had a success model for our volunteers and for our program. So what I learned throughout this was that communication is key, but we want to be not too hard and not too soft. We have to find our happy medium, and we have to meet people where they are and bring them along with us. The pace of expanding these volunteer positions, I attempted to do too many too quickly. So I would recommend, if you're going to do any of these initiatives, to take them one at a time and do them slowly. Cutting our number of committees from 13 to 8 was great, but it wasn't nearly enough. As I demonstrated earlier, we went down to 4, and that really became a powerhouse of energy and efficiency and effectiveness of how we really managed our program. And then a transition from do what you want to creating deliverables and working together, and then changing the focus. And most important was defining our all-iness. So what is it about your program or your organization that defines who you are, that you can make prevalent in everything that you're doing, whether it's communicating internally, externally, or as you go out and talk to people about your program on a daily basis. We did this at UNLV. I now have taken it to Granite State College. I have been in the role for about 7 months. Again, this is not something that you can take and completely implement just on your own by doing exactly what I have done. These are steps of things you can implement and do along the way. I have had to do this very differently because it is a different approach, a different organization. And again, as I said, our volunteers here in New Hampshire range about 4 regions of the state. So it's been taking a lot to work with, but it's been an interesting progress, and it takes a while to do it as well. So I'm in month 7, and we're probably only in about month 2 of starting to look at and beginning these changes. Emily, can we launch poll number 3? Thank you. So getting ready for our discussion and breakout sessions, I want you to think about, does your organization set clear expectations and accountability for your volunteers? Do you have those measurable outcomes? It looks like that's great. Most of us do, so that'll be nice for our discussion. And those who don't, hopefully we'll be able to, during our discussion questions, help you begin outlining those for you. So I know Peter's going to go into a little bit more about the breakout rooms, but some discussion questions to help you figure out how you are going to start this in your organization is, how do you adequately set these expectations? How do you create and define new volunteer opportunities in your organization? How do you communicate these opportunities? Are there any best practices that you're experiencing? What are the challenges that your organization has regarding volunteerism? And if you could do something over or different, what would that be? All right, we are all back. So we're going to go into discussion and questions. I like to leave some time for us to discuss what we talked about, to share your thoughts, some best practices you had in your rooms, to ask any questions of me or of the greater group. I shared my best practices. I shared my lessons learned. That doesn't mean that it works for everyone. So I want to give this opportunity. Did anybody have a great discussion in their room or something that they'd like to share about their program or someone else's? Feel free to use your raise hand or raise your hand and just unmute. Diana?
Hi. So I'm a job developer with Southern New Hampshire Services and NHEP, and we do have some best practices and some, depending on the job description role that we put our participants in, it's usually aimed at creating some sort of workforce development skill is what our participants end up going into doing. It's not mandatory. It's something that they want to do. But again, when we do it, I struggle with trying to get them to really see the bigger picture. Again, I deal with a lot of things like generational poverty and basically seeing that light at the end of the tunnel for their next steps and things like that. So what I, basically wanted to try and get out of this is how to create that positive look, positive outcome, even though they're already getting their job descriptions, they're they know what the outcome is for their resume, for their next steps, and trying to change the dynamics of why we do our work experiences. So, listening to the group and trying to get the buy-in from the folks that I work with is what I'm looking to try to get a takeaway from being in this discussion. So we did talk about some different, like AmeriCorps. I know of AmeriCorps, and I hear so much about AmeriCorps, and it's just such a large organization. I really didn't see how big it was. So now I'm thinking of things at a different, a different angle of how can I get someone to be involved in some of those things that AmeriCorps has to offer. Or we were talking with Leah Miller of the Bedford Animal Rescue League, and that's amazing. And again, just trying to change the mindset of my participants to want to do it, to realize that it's a better for them in the long run. So I'm looking for any suggestions.
Does anyone have any suggestions before I give mine? Any thoughts to help out Diana? We're here to collaborate. There's no wrong answer.
Hi, I was just curious on that, what you just posed up, which sounds interesting to me. It sounds like kind of a blend between being a volunteer and being a program participant. Did I not understand?
Nope, you are correct. If you're a program participant, you can choose to go into a work experience or to get more hands-on experience and learn more. But again, changing that mindset that, oh, I have to do that. Why don't I just stay home and, not do that? I don't really want to volunteer in the community, but trying to get them to see the benefits of it, trying to change the mindset of why it's done. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but until you, I guess, create an environment, I'm not really sure. There's just needs to be a change. There needs to be a mind shift moving forward about wanting to volunteer and still receiving the programmatic outcomes that we want for our participants, because it is for the best. It just, yeah, kind of at a loss.
Well, at QC by Collective, we call it a collective because we do try to, we work in sort of a blended model too. People often come in to get their bike worked on, do it together, but then quite often they express an interest in volunteering, which is really sweet. That is really wonderful when you can see that blend. We struggle, at least I've observed, that volunteering is kind of a privilege. It's something that you can do better if you have time and resources and mental energy. And we struggle with how to make volunteer opportunities really accessible to people who are very challenged just to get through their day-to-day life. And it seems that maybe some of the people you're working with have that. They've never seen volunteering as something that's even a chance of opportunity or why that would be good. Anybody else has that experience at all?
I can understand the experience, Abby, and I agree. For different reasons, I've had those experiences, like I said earlier, but was more based upon age and interest of the volunteer. Diana, it sounds like you work with younger people. Is that correct?
If you have a child and you're a single parent, yeah.
Okay. Well, younger people compared to my volunteers.
Yeah.
What types of volunteer opportunities are these? I'm just going to ask you some questions from my personal knowledge. So is this something that they need to commit to for many weeks? Is it something I can sign up for an individual? I can go on Tuesday at 5 for this one time. What types of experiences do we provide them?
There is a gamut. So as I had said, right now, I have someone that is volunteering at the Whitefield Public Library, and they're doing all the media relations for the library. I have someone else that volunteered at a senior center. And yes, there usually is a 16-week timeline on it. And sometimes you can do it again. I've had someone volunteer for New Beginnings, navigating recovery. You name it, we've done it. There's always a timeline. There's always criteria. Once you do your work experience, you come back, you revamp your resume. And if it's even sometimes those work experiences turn into on-the-job training and become a long-term job, which is what the ultimate goal is, to be honest. But sometimes it doesn't work out like that. But when we present, I guess probably the problem would stem from how we present going into a work experience, because it's so wide open. And most of our participants don't realize that we're here to assist in the greater next step, or the positive next step where everything's been so negative for so long. So those outcomes and expectations almost seem like rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm. Dana, do you have success stories that you share? Do you
Oh,
have
yes.
people come
Yeah.
in and
The
talk about their experiences?
The storytelling has become a bigger part. Again, I've only been in this position for about 4 months, but I was a coordinator for 3.5 years. And the positive outcome, that storytelling is becoming more and more prevalent in what I do. Hence, I did the storytelling workshop yesterday. And again, I still struggle with, there's just so much negative mindset. And again, I'm dealing with a different kind of population. And a lot of them do want to help. They do want to give back. They do want to create a better tomorrow, but still the negative of what they've gone through. I'm struggling with coming up with different ways to show them that there's more positive.
Do you, so when you're talking to them, do you utilize the language that you want them to use?
Yeah, I'm a language person. It's
Okay.
one of the reasons why I joined this. I pick up some languages and I make sure I use that. Again, like changing mindset and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, there were some other things that I was talked to about yesterday. So I'm just looking for some thoughts and opinions. And again, I'm enjoying getting to know some of these other organizations.
Yeah, I would say continue with the language. It takes a long time. I know you said you've been involved in this program in a different role, but it takes a very long time to have those language changes. I was in my role at UNLV for about 7 years. I can tell you that up until about the last 9 to 12 months before I left is when they finally started using my language. When it finally became positive, but it was just that consistency. Everything I published, everything that I said, any communication, enforcing that language in our team. Again, going back to that healthy organization model of our team and making sure that every single one of us used a common language. We printed it out, we put it on our walls in our offices. Every phone call, email, any communication at all had that language in it, and it was consistent across the board. So it takes some time. Sounds like to me you're making great strides and you're working towards those goals. In addition to having those storytelling times, maybe there's an opportunity for, I know it's work study and building skills. Maybe there's time for some mentoring opportunities in there. If you know that someone is doing media resources and another volunteer has a similar skill set or would like to learn that, creating that mentoring. Someone's coming in new, giving them that opportunity to build more than just going in and volunteering, but maybe building those interpersonal relationships as well as building some management experience on top of what they're doing outside of that. That's still a resume builder, even though it's not directly related to their work experience. So finding those small key pieces, and it may not be for everyone, but you may have some volunteers and some participants. Once you get those key stakeholders on board and they really become champions of your program and what you're doing, hopefully that'll end up kind of spreading throughout the organization as you go. But I would look for those opportunities to allow them connections with each other as well, kind of one-on-one if applicable.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I know someone asked in the chat about firing a volunteer. Has anyone ever had to fire a volunteer? So that is hard. It is very difficult. I don't look at it as firing. I look at it as we are now going in 2 different directions. So their goals and initiatives no longer align with our goals and initiatives. So we've gone through the process of having those one-on-one conversations. So Karen, I'm going to pick on you because you asked the question. So Karen, You know, this is the direction we're going. These are our initiatives. These are the things that we really want to do. How do you feel about that? Where do you see yourself in this organization? Where do you see yourself impacting what we're doing and our future goals? I understand that this is what you wanted, but now this is the direction we're going. So where would you like to see yourself? We want you to stay involved. If none of that works, then we have to go into the conversation of, unfortunately, the volunteer work that you're providing at this time no longer fits our structure. It's a difficult conversation to have. It's a very hard conversation to have because we don't ever want to fire our volunteers or, you know, not appreciate their work. However, looking at that cost benefit analysis of accountability is really important. So the cost of having a volunteer who's not aligning with our goals and our mission is more negative and more impactful in a poor way than losing that person and trying to gain more volunteers and new volunteers who want to get us going in the right direction. So for example, my family's been in sales for many years. When my father was in real estate, if the person didn't want to sell the house with the way that he did his model, he would say, thank you, I'm not the agent for you. And he would move on and find another one. Because working with that one person or trying to get that person on board when they just fought you every single step of the way took more of your time and energy away from what your goals were and what you were trying to do. So it's a very difficult conversation, but I would start it off in a positive manner. We all know that they really want to help. Over communicate that to them and then go from there. So Karen, I hope that answers your question. Any other questions, comments, things or discussions you had in your group that you would just like to share with the larger group?
How does the group deal with volunteer overenthusiasm and reining that in? We've recently had some struggles with volunteers acting independently of us. So I just wanted to poll the group and see if anybody else has had that experience and how you dealt with it when it came up.
Anyone have thoughts? And I was laughing with you, Karen, not at you, because I've experienced that, especially in my new role. Anne?
I'll speak to that a little. So I think that a talk on boundaries is always helpful. And especially post-COVID, right? I actually scheduled an in-service next week with my volunteers, and one of our social workers is just going to be talking about boundaries and sort of staying in your lane as far as what your roles are as a volunteer, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And so just a refresher course on boundaries, I think would be super helpful. You know, I know it's tricky sometimes. People get so enthusiastic, but just kind of reining them back and sort of going over what the real definition of their volunteer position is, and then boundaries, and just giving some examples of, like, not specific to that person and calling them out, but just giving some examples of like appropriate volunteerism, inappropriate volunteerism, what, you know, what the boundaries are. I think that's super helpful. Just throw that out there. By the way, this is amazing. This is a great presentation. Thank you so much. I've been like furiously taking notes.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I don't know, Emily, if we share the PowerPoints, but I'm also happy to, yeah, so we do.
Oh,
but I'm also happy to talk, share my additional notes and everything. I know PowerPoints are kind of more outliney than detailed. So, so I'm happy to share that as well, but thank you. And I'm glad everyone's participating. Catherine, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful. We have we have a really huge volunteer cohort. So we're trying to work on language about like a organization-wide email to all of our volunteers. So yeah, it's good to think about, and I'll try to implement some of that stuff on a larger scale as best I can.
Catherine, are they being overly enthusiastic by encroaching on other volunteer responsibilities or on staff responsibilities or both? or something different?
It's a little complicated, just due to our volunteer structure. We are a gleaning organization primarily. So what we're dealing with is volunteers seeing farms that we either do or do not have a partnership with, and then approaching the farms independently to glean on behalf of willing hands without consulting us, as like kind of a do-gooder on the side extra volunteer opportunity. But because we have long existing relationships with these farms, and it has gotten complicated on several occasions, but because we serve like a 40-mile radius, we can't keep track of them all because they only come like once or twice a week. It's gotten a bit out of hand at points, and it's mostly like it's over enthusiasm, but it's encroaching on our organizational relationships.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And
Yeah.
do you have consistent language and communication that you all do when you're reaching out to these organizations or these other farms?
I'm the point person. So at no point, these always catch us by surprise, because at no point has this ever been put forward as a volunteer opportunity or responsibility.
Okay.
It's a huge blindside, but it's been happening more frequently as we've gotten more volunteers through the pandemic. So yeah, we're trying, we've never had a problem with it before the last couple of years. So we're just, we're a bit blindsided by the whole thing.
Yeah, sometimes that over enthusiasm becomes overwhelming for us trying to get things. And building off of what Anne said, it may be a good opportunity for you to set those guidelines and maybe do like a mass email or a meeting or mass communication or a Zoom call saying, we're coming out of the pandemic, things are changing again for us. We're so grateful for all that you have been doing. Please note, these are our guidelines for moving forward. If you identify this, please let me know and contact me. If you do this, then, and kind of setting out those guidelines and stating, we have personal internal guidelines, we have internal rules that we need to follow, and we need to be consistent in our communication, what we're offering and providing to these partners that we're gaining. So this is the new platform that we're going to use, and kind of just outlining that for them and explaining why. That's important, giving them the power to say, hey, I found this place, and I'd love to work with you on getting that started if that's something you can do. Or, hey, I found this, and so you can start to communicate with them. I recently had to do that for, please don't advertise if you tested positive for COVID. That is a college liability. Please contact the office first. Please do not just start emailing people. So so that's a recent thing we've been going through, but I sent out a mass email to all of my volunteer leaders, outlined the process, explained to them why, and got really positive feedback from that of, oh, okay, that makes sense, thank you. So that could be a way to go.
To answer Karen's question, this is not something we actually really want volunteers to be doing at all, because we already have a lot of legal language and liability with bringing volunteers onto this private property. So we love the enthusiasm, but we'd love to hear about it if they see a bunch of squash sitting out somewhere, but we don't want them to approach the farmers at any point in the process. So yeah,
I think expressing that, and sometimes transparency is best, and just saying nicely what you just said, about the legality of it, and just being transparent is often helps as well.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.